Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Well, once again, Joe Rogan enters the conversation just to inject a little bit of common sense. And this is why having people like Joe Rogan with massive influence and massive platforms who provide a counter opinion to the mainstream narrative are so important. And this is also exactly why they want to shut down people like Joe Rogan so badly, because what they crave is control. And that's why they love to use fear. The Democrat establishment loves to take advantage of these crises, loves to take advantage of these very sensitive issues to always push for one thing: more control. A horrible event happens, and they push for more gun control, leaving less power in the hands of populace and more power in the hands of the government. You can't exactly stand up against tyranny, against Democrat and deep state tyranny, if society can't defend itself. And they do the same thing with every issue. People like Joe Rogan need to be silenced and deplatformed because he's pushing misinformation and dangerous information. It's putting people's lives at risk. That's what they tell you. This particular person or anyone pushing this particular idea must be shut down. Their voice must be stifled because they're a danger to democracy. They're a gateway to the alt-right. They're a gateway to extremism. Tucker Carlson must be taken down because of his views on illegal immigration and the dangerous conspiracy theories. And it's easy to get caught up. It's easy to get emotional. And look, even from time to time, I feel myself sort of sliding into it. When a terrible event like this happens, you start to rethink your positions, the emotions start to get at you, but the more time goes by, and the further away you move from the media hysteria, the closer you get to common sense. You know, the Democrats keep saying common sense gun reform, but when you put the pros and cons on a scale and you try to balance it, there's nothing common sense about it. What they're pushing for is purely un-American, unconstitutional, and just isn't in the benefit of American society as a whole. And that's exactly what Joe Rogan points out here, and the left is totally furious with him for once again countering their narrative and inserting common sense into the national dialogue. You know, leftoids are furious because Joe Rogan's probably right. Let me show you guys what's going on here, but of course, before we get into any of it, please make sure to leave a like, a comment, subscribe, share the video as much as possible. We are still shadow banned by the YouTube algorithm, hidden from non-subscribed viewers. And with that out of the way, let's roll the tape. Alright folks, take a look at this. Joe Rogan opposes gun control. Only criminals are gonna have them. Joe Rogan blasted calls to ban guns in the wake of the Texas elementary school incident, saying that if the government moved to take away firearms, then only criminals would have them.
And it happens in this country, like every now and then. It's like, how do you stop that? No one knows how to stop that. What is the answer? Is the answer take everyone's guns? Well, they're not going to give their guns up. So you're going to have only criminals are going to have guns. It's like, it's not going to be a good situation.
And of course, he's totally right. You know, America is a different place from any country on earth. In smaller European countries or Canada or Australia, it's very easy for them to enact massive gun legislation and basically create a society where no one is armed because they never had a Second Amendment to begin with, and there's just not really that many firearms, if any. Again, outside of the government's hands. But in America, it's a completely different situation. If Democrats were to enact sweeping gun legislation on a federal level and the Supreme Court was to allow it all to happen, or even if constitutional amendments were to pass, or if they were to abolish the Second Amendment, well then how do you deal with that situation? How do you then make a gun-free society in a country that has had a gun culture ingrained in its society for such a long time, in a country that has hundreds of millions of weapons and firearms widely available and dispersed throughout the nation? All you're gonna do is go after regular, law-abiding citizens, force them to surrender their weapons, and then there's gonna be a vast black market of weapons in the hands of criminals and illegal alien cartel members. That just doesn't sound smart. In fact, it sounds incredibly stupid. Oh, but don't worry. Then what's the government gonna do? Announce a war on guns? Well, we know how the war on drugs worked. In other words, it's just not gonna work. But again, that's not even the most important point to be talking about. The second point that Joe Rogan makes is really where the conversation ends.
I wrote this thing once that said this country has a mental health problem disguised as a gun problem. And that's what it is. And I don't think it's wise to take the guns away from the people and leave all the power to the government. We see how they are even with an armed populace. They still have a tendency towards totalitarianism. And there's a natural inclination when you're a person in power to try to hold more power and acquire more power. And there's never an inclination to give more power back to the people, to give more freedoms back to the people. Freedoms lost are rarely regained.
Especially over the last 2 years, we have seen a slow march towards authoritarianism, not only in the United States, but across the Western world and civilized nations. There's a reason why government overreach and this desecration of individual rights wasn't as bad in the United States as it was in other countries. It's very easy for Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to come out and say something like this.
We're introducing legislation to implement a national freeze on handgun ownership. What this means is that it will no longer be possible to buy, sell, transfer, or import handguns anywhere in Canada. In other words, we're capping the market for handguns.
And be applauded as a liberal hero, but let's just say there's a reason why just recently in Canada, people's bank accounts were being seized by the government and mounted police officers were trampling over old women. There's a reason why in Australia, people were being locked away in camps, isolated and quarantined from society, with the entire nation being shut down and people's livelihoods being destroyed, people's freedoms being taken away from them without any opposition. There's a reason why still in those countries, a lot of the restrictions and regulations and disregard for civil liberties and personal freedoms are still in effect. While in America, and especially in places like Florida and Texas, it's just not the same. And so at the end of the day, it's a balancing act. What Democrats are proposing is sacrilegious, it's blasphemy, it's antithetical to the core vision of the Founding Fathers. At the end of the day, an unarmed populace is a population that is easy to control, and a population that is willing to hand over everything, full supreme power to the government, is a population that has already been whittled down, a population that doesn't believe in true freedom anymore and is already willing to give in power, to cede power to the government. And we definitely know how that ends. And so purely from the utilitarian view, what's worse? Slightly higher rates of gun crime? Or giving away the only thing that can protect a society from a tyrannical government? I mean, make your choice. I think where most Americans stand on this issue is pretty clear. And again, I think liberals are having the wrong conversation. Once again, Joe Rogan hits the nail on the head. It's not the object, it's the people. The problem isn't the inanimate object. The problem is an epidemic of mental health disorder. And until there is true common sense policy and action taken to tackle that exact issue, this problem is not going away. And again, probably one of the most important things to reiterate is that the problem definitely isn't law-abiding, tax-paying, freedom-loving, patriotic Americans and their constitutional right to bear arms which shall not be infringed, with the explicit reason to not only defend themselves and their families and their communities, but to defend themselves against the inevitable emergence of tyranny. It's the natural cycle of human society, and that right there trumps any type of fear-mongering or emotional rhetoric that liberals are using to convince you to give up your rights and to cede more power to these corrupt bureaucrats in Washington. Again, folks, liberals trying to politicize another terrible event, well, it's just not doing it. It doesn't change the facts, and it's not changing people's minds. Joe Rogan, who represents, I'd say, the American independent, is the perfect example of that. And that's probably exactly why they want to shut Joe Rogan down. Just like Donald Trump and just like so many other figures, just like Elon Musk, he stands in their way. That's what I got for you guys, though. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, a comment, subscribe. I'm going to get back to work. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.